Hey everyone. Today I'm reaching out to parents and via social media, and I've been thinking a lot about what would I have wanted my parents to know, not my parents, but parents at my school. What would I have wanted my parents to know if I had anticipated that we would be here? And I think in the days and weeks to come, I'm hoping to share a little bit of the knowledge that I'm privileged to have about teaching and learning, and some tips that are going to help you to know that, first of all, you're enough, and second of all, that you can do this, and we are wired for hard things. That's what Jody Carrington tells us, is that we are wired for hard things. I'll talk a little bit more about Jody in another podcast, but at this point, I just want to give you some grounding information about reading to your child at home, particularly if you've got a new reader at home. So that's what this video is going to be about today. So I know that lots of parents are wondering, how do I know if the reading is the right level for my child? I would say at this point that that's not the most important filter. What I would say is that, especially our new readers, they need reading experiences. They need to hear an expert reader like you. They need to hear you read and see how a reader who's experienced actually reads. They need to hear the fluency, they need to hear the expression in your voice, and the most important thing is that they need to come away from reading experiences loving reading. And I can't say that enough, that in the early years, the most important thing that we can do for our kids is to demonstrate to them our love of reading and help to inspire them to really see reading and books and literature and nonfiction as really creative things that they can get excited about. So often, particularly when I hear about parents reading at home with their kids, they'll say things like, I read with my child, but it's a struggle, and we both end up upset by the end of it. So stop. What I'll say is the goal for you and the goal for your child is to connect. We know that learning to read is a social process. So connect and enjoy the books together and help inspire a lifelong joy and love of reading. That's the most important thing that you're going to be focusing on right now. So share all kinds of literature, and I'll let you in on a tip, and it's a bit of an annoying tip, but first of all, kids learn to read from books that they know well. I've known that from the time I was a grade 1 teacher back in the 90s. But students really do learn to read from books that they know well. So while it can be really annoying to get asked by your child to read the same book over and over and over, we see this particularly in preschool kids and kids in kindergarten and grade 1, that they want to read that book over and over and over. What I will tell you is that we know that every time that they come to that book, they're seeing something slightly different. And we know that children learn to read again. Children learn to read from books that they know well. So what you need to know is that you don't need to have a huge stack of books, right? It's good to have a couple of new books every week, and as teachers we do that as well. We come back to the books that the kids know well, but we introduce books all the time. So it's really great for them to have kind of that anticipation of that special new book. They're still going to want to come back to that book that they know well, and that's okay. So here's an example. This book is I'm a Frog by Mo Willems, and if you have young children, you have probably read some of Mo Willems' books. You've probably tried to hide them under pillows or under beds so that you didn't have to read it again for the 1,000th time since Christmas. But this is a really good example of a book that a child will know well and can actually participate with you. When Mo he's got a lot of humor. He's got a lot of repetitive text. It's accessible to kids, and they love it. And they love it. They love the book, and they love their time with you. There's time for them to go on to books that have more text on the page. There's time for them to move on to books that you might think have more depth. I've been actually enlightened by a teacher at Belfast School, Miss Fraser. Shout out to you, because she introduced me to not to the books because I knew the books were there, but to that there actually is quite a lot of depth and a lot of meaning and lessons in these books that seem really frivolous at first glance. So in this book here, first of all, when you're reading with kids, They should never read a book cold. And I'm going to say that again because it's really, really important. They should never read a book cold, especially if they're a new reader. We often think, well, can they read it independently? Can they read it on the first glance? That actually doesn't support a new reader. What I will tell you, we would only do that if we were doing standardized tests, and that's not what this is about. This is about creating a love for reading and building up their skills. So we often do something called a book talk. So what I'll say to kids is take a look at the cover. What do you predict? Predicting is one of the 12 things that we know, and over the course of the next couple of weeks I will let you know what the other 11 are, but it's one of the 12 things that good readers do. They predict. So if we look at the cover and we say, I wonder what the prediction is, and we give kids time to really look at what's happening, see if they can pick out certain details that are happening in the text, what are the clues that they have, and can they make predictions. It doesn't even matter if their prediction is right. We know from brain science that as soon as they start to make a prediction, they start a mental map that then starts to help them to create meaning. So that's a really good thing that you can be doing with your kids. Help them to make predictions before you ever open that book. Okay, so prediction is the first thing for today. The next thing is I want you to, when you come to a book that's new, and maybe even a book that you haven't picked up in some time, is to go through and just do a picture walk. Ask them to describe what's happening without reading the text, right? Right now, what we know is that for kids and actually for anyone, we can only focus on one cognitive load at a time, which means one thing that takes us really thinking about what we're doing. So for kids that aren't automatic readers, they can't concentrate on making meaning and at the same time sounding out and decoding. Sometimes that can be really difficult for them. So what we want to do is help them make meaning first, and then the decoding is something that comes easier because meaning is connected to the words that they're trying to sound out. But overall, their comprehension goes up as well. So as I would go through this book, I would open up and say, what do you see happening here? And pause, right? What do you see happening? Do you have any predictions? Right? And we go through, we talk about the different pages and what their purposes are. What do you see happening? You can even cover up the words that are on the page so that they have to actually pay attention to the context of the pictures. And as you go through, they're going to start to actually tell in their own words a story that makes sense to them. Okay? It might not match the text, but guaranteed some of the text and some of the vocabulary is going to be in the words that they're already activating in their memory. So you walk through and you get them to describe what's happening. Describe what's happening. Describe what's happening, right? So you would do this for the entire book before you would ever read it. Another tip, if you've got kids that perhaps this is a book that you're not sure is at their level. We often talk about the 5-finger rule. If there are more than 5 words, and sometimes books don't have even 5 words on a page, but if there's more than 5 words on a page that they're having difficulty with, that's not a book that you want them to read independently, but you can read it with them. That works really well too. All right, so we've gone through and we've done our book walk, and we're ready to have the kids read the book, right? No. Again, we never want a child to read a book cold, particularly if they're a new reader. So what I would do is I would go through the book with them at least the first time, and I would read to them, I Am a Frog by Mo Willems. Ribbit. Can you find the word ribbit? Get them to point to it. Ribbit. Piggy. Can you tell why it's a question? Point with me. Ribbit, 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 ribbit. Do you think he would say it that way? Oh, he might have some expression, right? Ribbit, 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 ribbit. Right? So I'm going through and I'm reading the book with them. I'm reading it to them, trying to read it with some expression, trying to read it, make it fun. So the first time they're just enjoying the book. I wouldn't even have them read with me until I had done a book walk, I had read through the book with them, and then we had read through it together. So you gradually want to release to them doing it independently from having you as a model. You do, we do, and then you pass it over to the child. We call that the optimal learning model. Okay, so last tip for today, moms and dads. We call this oral cloze, C-L-O-Z-E. So when we are reading a book and we are using oral cloze, what we're doing is we're actually leaving out words that kids can anticipate and fill in for us. So as I'm reading a book aloud to a child and I'm sharing the pictures, right? And I say, 5 minutes ago she was a, my voice goes up and I leave the space for them. They're going to say, pig, right? And then it says, now she is a, and they fill in the last word, frog. So using oral cloze is a really good way to draw attention to the text and involve them in the reading so that they can participate and they can access the meaning-making parts of their brain. So they're actively trying to create context and meaning from listening to you. And that's a good step to doing it in their own reading. And last tip for today. If you're reading through, maybe trying oral cloze, and you find that it's not something they can do, if you're finding that they're having a lot of difficulty with even retelling the story by the pictures in your book walk, then it's okay to just share that story with them and have them sit on your lap, cuddle in, and enjoy the story with you. You can come back to that book again once the child is comfortable with that book, once that book is a friendly book. Then you can reintroduce some of these strategies to try and get them to participate in the actual reading of the book. Students learn to read from books that they know well. If you can keep that in mind while you're working with kids at home, you're not going to get frustrated. They're going to enjoy that time with you, and they're actually going to improve in their reading. Thanks everybody for listening. Oh,